Huddle Up with Gus is partnered with and distributed by TribLive.com. TribLive.com is your source for local news in Western Pennsylvania. Get breaking news and the best sports commentary around from Tim Benz, Mark Madden, Kevin Gorman, and more online at TribLive.com.
The winner of over 400 games as an NCAA basketball head coach. He's written 3 books, is a motivational speaker, a successful entrepreneur, and an ESPN commentator. The high school coach of one of the greatest players in college and NBA history. His story is inspiring. He battled social and economic adversity to rise to the top of his profession. Please welcome into the Huddle, Mike Jarvis.
Joining us today on the Huddle is Coach Mike Jarvis. Coach has coached a lot of wonderful athletes in basketball that not only college players, but have gone on to the NBA and been Hall of Famers, and some the greatest ever in their positions.
I've always been a big fan, and as you know, my niche is like mid-'90s college hoops, and Coach Jarvis was in the middle of that, thick and heavy. So yes.
Yeah. So Coach, thanks for joining us on Huddle Up today, and we're going to get you right in the huddle with us, and really we want to ask you, what started your love of sports? Like, how old were you? Was it your parents? You know, that influence, that first influence. What was that for you?
Well, first of all, I always give praise and glory to God for giving me an incredible family, a mother who was just the greatest, who allowed her little chubby son. When I was growing up, my nickname was Crisco. I was the little fat kid in the neighborhood, and they didn't want to call me Fatso, so they gave me the name Crisco. And one day, Crisco, in fact, on his 11th birthday, his brother Richard had given him a basketball. And he was on his way to the basketball courts, but in order to get there, he had to cross the field. So he was at Hoyt Field in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on his way to the basketball courts. And all of a sudden, one of the local heroes, Stretch Headley, Little League coach, was calling, Crisco, come on over here. So I ran over as fast as my little fat legs could take me. And he said, would you like to be on my team? And I said, I would love to. And I looked around and I saw they had 8 players. And guess what? They didn't have a catcher. And, you know, back in the old days, the little fat kid was always the catcher. So I became the catcher. And what I really became that day was it started my journey in sports, my love for sports, and wanting to basically be a leader. And so I was the captain of the team. I was the leader of the team. And just fell in love with sports. And at that same time, that same birthday, it's amazing how God works. My brother Richard, who had brought me to basketball, didn't realize he was going to be introducing me to stretch and baseball. He took me to my first Celtics game. And you know, Bill Russell was playing in his first season. And I fell in love with, the Celtics, with Red Auerbach, with the players. And without even knowing it, my coaching career really began on that day, my birthday. And, so that's how I began. And then that led to, playing other sports, football, basketball, baseball in grammar school. And then when I got to high school, I broke my ankle as a freshman playing football. And I said, no more football. I'm sorry. I love the game. But I then devoted my time to basketball and baseball. And eventually, I stayed with basketball. And that's how it began for me. And, it's really amazing when you think about beginnings, how each and every one of us have some incredibly, just unique beginnings.
You mentioned your coach in Little League.
Yeah.
Was that really the first coach that you had that really kind of influenced the direction you were going?
Well, my first coach was my mom, Dorothy. My second coach was my big brother, Richard, my sister, Trudy. However, my first sports coach was a fellow by the name of Rindge Jefferson, who taught us how to play games in basketball at the Cambridge Community Center. So around the same time that I was learning how to play basketball, that's when I met Stretch. So Stretch Headley and Rindge Jefferson at the community center were my first 2 coaches. And the thing about both of them is they these guys were, I mean, they just loved what they did. They loved kids. They were very positive influences. If you used bad language, they'd throw you out. I mean, they were real good teachers, of the fundamental teachers. And I think I really started to appreciate, or later on, I realized how fortunate I was to have my first two coaches were into fundamentals. We're into doing the little things on and off the court.
Yeah, I'm sure that helped you with your coaching career, because fundamentals are a big part of any game, even when you get to the highest level. If you don't have the proper fundamentals, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So your coaches, Coach Headley and what was the other coach's name?
Stretch?
Rindge Jefferson. Rindge Jefferson.
So, and Rich, they gave you a lot of a good understanding of how to start and love the game. And it's all about fundamentals and hard work. So then, what high school did you go to after you were in your youth?
Okay, I went to, there were two high schools in Cambridge, two public high schools. One was Rindge Technical, which was an all-boys school, and the other was High and Latin, where my future wife went to school. But I went to Rindge Technical. I went to Rindge Technical because, that's where the real men went. And my brother had gone there, and he always talked about Rindge. So I went to Rindge Technical, and it just so happened that the name of the high school was the first name of Rindge Jefferson, my basketball coach. And there was no logical connection. So I went to Rindge Technical High School. In high school, I had the opportunity to, continue to play. I told you I played football until I broke my ankle as a freshman. Then I played basketball and baseball. I was a captain of the baseball team. And I was very fortunate. I had a really, really great guy for a coach, Ed Culhane. And all of my neighborhood buddies, in fact, my best friend, Larry Stead, was the best player in the state. And we played we won the championship in my senior year at Rindge Tech. They had what they called the Tech Tournament back then, Gus. All the teams in Eastern Massachusetts would come into the Boston Garden, and they would play, and they would compete for the championship. Well, we won the championships, and the reward for that was, besides the fact that you played in front of 13,909, which was the sellout number at the Garden, you got to ride the fire engines through the city of Cambridge after you won the championship. So at midnight, after we won the Tech Tournament championship, we rode the fire engines through the city of Cambridge, went back down through my old neighborhood, past my house. And I tell you what, I still get goosebumps thinking about that night. And then, and then as the good Lord would have it, I was seen by a junior college coach during the tournament. And I got a scholarship to Chamberlain Junior College, which I needed to go to bring up my SAT scores so that I could eventually go to Northeastern University, where I met the guy that really taught me how to coach basketball, Dick Dukeshire.
Tell us what it was like as a high school player to walking in the Boston Garden. I mean, you're right in the middle of the dynasty, basically, of the Celtics.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I tell you what, like I said, 6 years earlier, my brother had taken me to my first Celtics game. And during that time that Bill Russell, from 56, through the 60s, they won 9, 10 world championships. So I got a chance to see every one of them. And in those days, you could go up to the box office during the playoffs and buy a ticket. And you could buy a ticket and have good seats for $1.50, which is what my brother used to save up to buy our tickets. And to be able to be in the Boston Garden and play on that same old court that the Celtics played on, and that my hero Red Auerbach coached that. I mean, words can't even describe it. That in itself, even if we had lost, didn't win the championship, it still would have been one of the greatest memories of my life.
Do you remember something that Red Auerbach said? Like one of his famous quotes? I'm sure he had a bunch of them. But what was your favorite thing? What is your memory of Red Auerbach, why you looked up to him so much?
Well, first of all, I looked up to him early on because I just saw how his teams played as a team, how 5 guys became one, how he could build a team that was so unselfish with so many great players, starting with Bill Russell and Bob Cousy and Sam Jones and Casey Jones and Satch Sanders and John Havlicek. I mean, he had a way of just putting teams together that I have always admired. In fact, I tried to put my teams together with the same mindset that he had. Years later, and we'll get to GW, I'm sure, when I really got to know Red, and when we used to sit together at the end of every year and talk about coaching, not X's and O's, but coaching and people, I remember one thing, and I've used this in a couple of the books I wrote as it relates to character. And I remember Red saying to me, he says, Mike, he says, first of all, I remember him saying at the Hall of Fame, the first time I ever met him in the men's room at the Hall of Fame in Springfield, okay? And he said to me, he said, you know, I may not always be right. He says, but I never been wrong. And he says, that kid you got, that Ewing kid, he's going to be one of the greatest basketball players that ever lived. And he was right. Later on, the thing that I remember him saying to me that I'll take to the grave with me, and he said, Coach, when you recruit character, not characters. And I never forgot that. Recruit character, not characters. And when you look back at his team and you look at the people he had men of great character. Yes, they had great ability, but they were men of great character.
That's so important, having great character, being humble, and being able to work hard and work within a team. And that's what most great teams are all about.
Right.
You're in high school, Coach, and you played basketball. What was your position in basketball?
Well, the little fat kid, he lost some weight, so he wasn't the little fat kid. He was just maybe pleasingly plump. I couldn't run too fast. I couldn't jump too high, but I could lead, and so I was a point guard. I had to be a point guard, and I love that because you basically are the coach on the team. It's just like the catcher on the baseball field. I was always in a position where I was telling other people what to do. And I was always much better at telling people what to do and giving instruction than taking it.
Well, I think it's important that you tell people what to do, but the other side of it, are they listening?
Yes.
Because a lot of people try to tell other people what to do, but they don't want to listen to them. So obviously, if they were listening to you, they had a lot of respect for you.
Yes, and they did. And because, you know what, because I was fortunate to have had some great teachers and coaches. I was fortunate right from the beginning to have some great players so I could put together a winning resume. And you know how young people are. I mean, they want to know, okay, what have you done? Have you ever won a championship? Who have you ever coached? And when you got those kinds of things in your resume and your background, then they pay a lot more attention to you. So you can get from a point where you, at a younger age, when I was young and teaching phys ed at the high school, I'd have to show them. As people start to see that you know what you're talking about, and you get a little older and you get a little smarter, you don't have to show them. You can teach them, and you can use other people to demonstrate. So I went from being the guy that would take a kid on the court and actually physically show him to a guy that didn't have to do that. I could use somebody else to demonstrate, and I could do the teaching.
So what junior college did you end up going to, Coach?
I went to Chamberlain Junior College. It was, there was a guy there. His name, everybody had nicknames. His name was Hockey Powers. He was I don't know if he played hockey, but he was a basketball coach there, and he gave me a scholarship to go there. And it was in Boston. It was somewhat of a preppy junior college. Most of the kids that went there, they went there because they could afford it. And then myself and my teammate, Larry Stead, we went there because he was in the process of starting a basketball program at the junior college. So we played all the top junior college teams in New England, and as well as college teams. We played Boston College freshmen, Northeastern, BU. We had a great schedule, a really, really fine coach, and we had a lot of success.
And you played baseball there too, didn't you?
I did. I played baseball. In fact, I tell you what, here's an interesting story. In 1962, Okay, I'm the point guard leading our team to the Tech Tourney Championship in the Garden. After the basketball season ends, I go to baseball, where I'm a catcher. Now I'm the captain of my baseball team. So we go from basically being undefeated to going to not winning a game. My baseball team didn't win a game the same season. You talk about highs and you talk about lows. I mean, but I loved it anyhow. And because I was playing, and having fun with my friends. And New England's a great place to grow up and play sports. Baseball's tough because, the spring is so short. By the time the weather gets good, the baseball season's over.
Yeah, like for us, when we had baseball in high school, we were in the gym for till the first game. And we were pitching off wooden mounds and hitting in the batting cage. You never were outside because it was just all mud.
No.
Well,
no, I mean,
we didn't have AstroTurf, Coach.
Oh yeah, when we used to play baseball outside in the spring, we would tape the balls up with different colors, so when the balls went out into the snow, we could find them. It was crazy.
Now, you from junior college, you ended up going to Northeastern. Did you want to stay in the Boston area? Was that the idea, or did you have offers to go other places?
I didn't have offers. There were very, very few offers for African Americans, for black kids, for poor kids to go to college, period. There was so few opportunities. I mean, when I played at Northeastern, there couldn't have been a handful of black players playing in New England at the time. There weren't as many scholarships. In fact, when I went to Northeastern University, I started out with no scholarship. I worked my way all the way up to a half a scholarship. And that was a lot. And I mean, at that time, and it really helped. But Northeastern was a co-op school where you worked 6 months, you went to school 6 months. And so I was able to afford it. I lived at home, took the train into school every day. But I eventually worked my way up to a half a scholarship. And let me tell you this about Northeastern. When I was a sophomore, I quit the basketball team. I was very disappointed with the amount of playing time I was getting. You know how people always talk about, you're not playing. Okay, so I quit. It could have been the worst mistake I ever made in my life. But my brother Richard convinced me to go back to Coach Dukeshire, ask him for forgiveness, ask for a second chance. Thank God I did. He gave me a second chance to come back on the team. I still didn't play that much, but that's when I decided I definitely knew what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to go back to my high school and coach there. So every day I had this big, thick blue notebook, 3-binder, and I would take notes of practice. I would take notes of how he taught, what he taught. And that basically was the Bible, was sort of like my foundation. I was like the Old Testament for me in coaching. And I used that book. And this guy, Dick Dukeshire, he left Northeastern. He went to Greece to become the national coach. And he's the guy that really started Greek basketball to put them on the map. And I learned so much from him. He was the best, I think one of the best teachers that ever taught basketball in New England.
So, Coach, you mentioned some things that I think really sports transcends. Is you probably went through some racism and some difficulties, as you mentioned. Kids that were black from inner cities weren't getting scholarships, weren't doing those things, and you had to overcome a lot of those battles. So what was that little bit of that like for you? And do you remember some kind of points in your life where you had to overcome that and you had to face that adversity?
Well, you know what? I always talk about not just black kids, because we're in a culture and a time now, where people are talking about things like reparations, which I totally just don't believe in. But anyhow, that's a whole nother story. I always refer, to poor people, because see, the struggle is not about color usually. It's about money. There is a color. The color's green, just like the background that you guys have. And it's more about poor people, trying to get, get ahead. It's more about poor people trying to go to good schools, get an education, get a good job. Not just black, not just Hispanic. It's poor people, white people as well. And that's the great thing about where I grew up in Cambridge, in the neighborhoods in Cambridge, with the exception of one neighborhood. All the neighborhoods were really homogeneous neighborhoods. I mean, multicultural, poor, and and many of them were poor neighborhoods like the one that I grew up in. We didn't know we were poor because we ate. We ate every day. We had clothes on our back. We usually had a pair of sneakers on our feet, and we played sports. We didn't know how poor we were. We didn't realize a lot of the struggles that people were going through. My mother had to work 3 jobs, but she never complained. She went and worked those jobs. She put food on the table, clothes on our back. If you had asked me when I was growing up, I would have told you I was a rich kid from Cambridge. But I mean, I was poor, but I didn't know it, and that was good. But what we learned that, and my mother taught me, no one could ever take away your education. So get your education. If you love sports and you have the opportunity to play, play. And maybe someday, who knows, you might even get a job coaching. But the bottom line is, I didn't know it. And yes, there were a lot of things. Like I remember the first time when someone called me, okay? I was riding my bike in another city, and I heard it, and I said, "What the heck? Who are they talking to?" I didn't even realize they were talking to me. And but we were taught, you know what? Don't let anybody take away your dreams. Go where you are comfortable going. Don't worry about who's there. Just go. And when you get an opportunity, make the most of it. And yes, as a poor kid, whether you're black or white, I'm sure that people maybe have said to you, "Hey, you know what? You may not have as much ability as that other guy. That means you're going to have to work twice as hard as that other guy." And that's what I was taught, that if I wanted to make it, I could make it. But I'd probably have to work twice as hard because I may not get the same opportunity. And let me tell you this, okay? When I came out of Northeastern University, I wanted to go back to teach at Cambridge, at Rindge Tech in Cambridge, at my alma mater. And they had a white Irish Catholic superintendent of schools. So when I filled out my application for the job, because they didn't know who I was, or they didn't remember me because I wasn't that good, I made sure I put my middle name on the application. My middle name is Delaney, Delaney, Delaney. So I wrote my name out, that middle name, as big as I could. I wanted them to think that I was an Irishman. And I don't know if that helped me get the job or not, but I got the job, and I also got placed at the school that I wanted to be.
So that was your first coaching
Rindge Tech.
job. You came equipped with your coaching Bible that you talked about earlier. Was that your first experience as a coach?
No. I had it's funny, when I went back to the high school to teach, I wanted to coach the basketball team, but they had a coach, and I couldn't get the basketball job. So my college coach, Coach Dukeshire, who I had quit on, but went back to, he really took a liking to me, and he saw how serious I was. So I would teach phys ed during the day. I then was an assistant football coach, coaching the defensive backs right after school. And then I would get into my Volkswagen and go about 100 miles an hour down Storrow Drive over to Northeastern University, where I worked as an assistant coach and coached in the evening because practices were at night. That was my day. Teach during the day, coach football after school, and then get over to the college and coach basketball. So I was at Northeastern University for 5 years. The last year I was at Northeastern University, I mean, I had some good coaches to work with there. Dick Dukeshire was my coach, and I worked with him. Jim Bowman, who went to the FBI, and Jim Calhoun was at Northeastern as the head coach my last year. Now I couldn't get that head job at Northeastern because they just weren't ready to hire a black coach then. So that's all right. I got a call from my brother-in-law who had a friend who was a friend of Satch Sanders, great Boston Celtic, played on 9 world championship teams. And he was just taking the job at Harvard, which was less than a 10-minute walk from my high school. And we met. He offered me the assistant's job at Harvard. So once again, I would teach during the day, and then I would go over to Harvard and coach with Satch for the next 4 years. So my first 9 years out of college, I was teaching phys ed, I was coaching as an assistant at Northeastern and Harvard, and then my 10th year, I was I guess in line to get the head job at Harvard, but they hired somebody else. That's when Satch went back to the Celtics to coach, and I was out of coaching for a year, and I didn't know what I was going to do. Started a youth basketball program called Shoot Straight, which we'll talk about, and lo and behold, the next year, the 10th year after going back to the high school to coach, the job finally became mine. So 10 years later, I was coaching at the high school. But there was a reason for that, and I'm going to go right into it. And the reason was, and this is why I think all that happened, was because I was being prepared for something greater than coaching at Harvard. I was being prepared for coaching one of the greatest players who ever played the game, Patrick Ewing. Because in the fall of, I want to say 1973, 74, 73, Patrick came into my gym as a 12-year-old with his phys ed teacher who knew nothing about basketball, and asked me if I would teach him and Patrick how to play the game of basketball. So I said, great. In fact, this is another great story. I said to Steve, Steve, why do you want this kid to play basketball? I thought he'd tell me, well, coach, he's 6'3", he's 12 years old. He's a big guy. And he said to me, he said, Mike, I want him to learn how to play basketball because I want him to make some friends. The kids are making fun of him. He had just moved from Jamaica. He had a little bit of an accent. He was tall, he was skinny, he was clumsy. And so we started working together. 4 years later, I'm coaching this guy at the high school. And together, we lost one game. Okay, we went 77-1. We won 3 consecutive state championships. We were the number 1 team in the country. I had the number 1 player in the country. So I really believe, I know for a fact that those 10 years were purposeful, and they were designed for me to make that transition from being just a coach to coaching.
So, Coach,
one of the greatest
when you're
players
coaching Patrick Ewing in high school,
yes.
I coach a similar player who's in the NFL right
Yes.
now, Ezekiel Elliott, who plays for the Cowboys, right?
Okay.
Really, really, really good talent.
Okay.
And
Yep.
there's not a lot of plays that I had to make up, right? It's just get him the ball. Yes. So with Patrick,
Yes.
It almost probably was like, hey, let's get the ball down court, let's get him to him. What was your kind of mindset to keep him involved, but also keep the rest of your team involved as well?
Well, the beautiful thing about Patrick didn't have to score to be a happy player. He just had to win. He didn't care about scoring. So he made my job really easier. And I remember saying to him, Patrick, I want you, you're going to be the next Bill Russell. Now, he didn't even know who Bill Russell was at the time. So my mindset regarding Pat was, let's help develop the best defender in basketball. Let's use Bill Russell as the model. And when I fell in love with Bill Russell, it wasn't because of him scoring points. It was because of, number 1, him winning. Number 2, his defense, blocking shots, and yet being in a position where when you needed him to score, he could score. So Patrick was easy because never once did he say, I'm not getting enough touches, because he learned that every shot that was taken was not going to go in. And if he wanted touches, he could go up and get the rebound, or he could block the shot, and he could help us win championships. And that's what he was concerned with. So Patrick never scored more than, his senior year in high school, I think he might have finally averaged 20 points a game. He could have averaged 50 a game. And the other thing was that most of our games were one-sided, lopsided. So I made a deal with Patrick and the rest of the guys that I would not punish them for being as good as they were by taking away all their minutes. Because there were some nights the game was over after 2 minutes. So I made a deal with my team. I says, when we play a team that we're going to beat badly, you're going to play the first 4 minutes of each quarter, and then the other guys are going to play. Never, ever did he complain about that, nor did my other players. So there were most nights he only played half a game. And, I mean, there were nights when he scored 30 because he had to. There were nights when he had 20 block shots because he had to. But, it wasn't about numbers. It was about winning. And I always told him that the greatest player that I ever seen was Bill Russell, and he didn't have to score points to be the greatest player. And he certainly, to me, he was. If I was picking a team today,
So, Coach,
he would be the first
you're
player
coaching
I would have on my
Patrick
team.
Ewing. He's probably getting recruited by every college. You probably had a million coaches sitting up in the stands or visiting. What was that like? That had to be a pretty cool experience when you're coaching high school and you're seeing all these, college coaches coming in and recruiting him when you're still doing this. What was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, it was crazy. I mean, it almost gets to a point where it's too much. I mean, we could have charged admission for coaches and made a lot of money. But so what happened was, once again, by having been a college coach, having been on the other side of the recruiting table, we were able to set up a system. In fact, Leslie Vischer, the sports commentator who used to write for the Boston Globe, wrote some articles about the oohing of Ewing and how the college coaches would have to go through this system. So I took things that other coaches had done. Coach Donahue had done with Lou Alcindor before he became Kareem when he was in high school, and some other things. We put them all together in a nice package, and we basically had an incredible recruiting plan. And Patrick's mother, Dorothy, God rest her soul, she trusted me, and she said, "Coach, you just do what you think needs to be done." She says, "I will support you 100%. So she never, ever, she just let me, handle the recruitment of Patrick. And I promised her that I would try to make the recruitment process as painless as possible, and that I would set up a system where she would not be bombarded with phone calls from coaches every minute, that we would basically take the recruiting process from the beginning to the end, and Patrick would have as normal a senior year in high school as any kid could have. And he did. And so we started out, every school in the country recruited him, and then we whittled it down. I think we ended up coming down to 16 schools that we invited to come to the high school for visits. So we had, not only John Thompson at Georgetown where he went, but Dean Smith and Dr. Tom Davis from Boston College, Larry Brown from UCLA, Rolly Massimino, you name them, we had them in, okay? And then we whittled that list down to 6 schools that he would visit because he could take 6 visits. So he visited Boston College, Boston U, Georgetown, Villanova, North Carolina, and UCLA. And then he would whittle it down further to 3 and then pick one. And
Coach, you coached another terrific basketball player named Rumeal Robinson. What was that like?
Yeah. Another incredible story. Another kid that was born in Jamaica, moved to Cambridge. His story, he should have done a movie after he made the free throws against Seton Hall in the mid 80s and won the national championship. His story, honestly, he had some tough times after Michigan, and after the NBA, but his story up until then, high school, he was a kid that basically was put, out in the street at night. When I say out in the street, he had no place to go, and a woman took him into a home, and I started working with Rumeal, and this is another way God works. Rumeal became a member of our Shoot Straight program when he was in grammar school, and that Shoot Straight program we started during that year that I was out of coaching. So all of the kids in Cambridge came up through this youth basketball program. And so I got to know him during that program. And then he came to the high school, and he was one of 3 guys. There was Patrick, there was Rumeal Robinson, and there was a kid by the name of Lance Doughton who went to Michigan to play football. Those three were the only freshmen that ever started at Rindge. And so Rumeal was, I mean, he developed into, I think, the best, probably the best player in the country.
He was a terrific college player, and like you mentioned, his free throws are probably some of the most memorable in NCAA history.
Yeah.
So, Coach, you go on now. You were in high school, then you took the next step. You transitioned again, and you moved up into college. And then, so what was your first college? Where was that you coached?
I was so fortunate. Once again, Thad Sanders calls me up. I had just taken my high school team to England and Wales for a trip. And he says, how would you like to coach at BU? I says, I would love to. So he says, well, you never know. A couple of days later, I'm meeting with the AD, Rick Taylor. A couple of days later, I'm meeting with the president, Ron Silva. And guess what? John Silva. And I ended up going to Boston University. And when I got to BU, they really weren't doing that well. But I had some really good players that really wanted to do well. And we had five really good years. In fact, we surpassed Rick Pitino's during his record of wins at BU. I think Rick had 99. We ended up with 101 in the 5 years. And that basically was sort of the beginning of my head coaching experience in college. And then, in fact, my leading scorer at BU that first year was a fellow by the name of Dredrick Irving, who happens to be Kyrie Irving's dad. And I mean, it's amazing how small the world is. And so we had some really, really super, super tough kids. Kids, I mean, they could have played football with you guys. And, great kids. And Jeff Timberlake, Tony DaCosta. I mean, we had some wonderful kids. And my son ended up coming to BU, and my nephew. And
well, BU's not an easy school to get into
George Washington.
either, even if you're playing sports.
No. That's right. It's an even tougher school to stay in. And in fact, they had a program at BU. I don't know if they still have it. They might. When the kid was sort of borderline, they put him in the basic studies program. That was probably the toughest school in BU. So if you got through the basic studies program, then you could go to any school at BU and you were going to be successful. Tough school.
You move on from BU. You coach at George Washington, St. John's, Florida Atlantic. You had an unbelievable college coaching career. So tell us a little bit about some of your highlights from those schools.
Well, BU, obviously, just getting to the NCAA tournament a couple of times. Unfortunately, when you get in at a school like BU, it means you're a low seed. So the first year we made it into the tournament, we had to play against Connecticut in Connecticut. The next time we made the tournament, we had to play against Duke in North Carolina. So you ain't winning in the NCAA. So when I go to GW, thanks to Bob Chernak, the vice president, he recruited me to GW. I had met him when I was coaching at BU when he was at Hartford. And he and I had a great relationship. And that was the most supportive school I've ever been at. I mean, Bob Chernak and Joel Trachtenberg, the president, and Jack Cavance, and those guys did everything they could to support the basketball program. So we built a pretty good program. And I would say the highlights for GW was 1993 for a couple of reasons. One, my son joined me as my assistant coach at GW, and we became the first African-American father-son coaching team in the history of Division I basketball. And that same year, we had a great end of the season. We ended up being the Cinderella team. We made the tournament as a 12 seed. We beat New Mexico, and we advanced all the way to the Sweet 16. And we ended up playing in Seattle in front of 41,000 people and 3 million plus people on TV, almost upset Michigan Fab Five. We had them, but we missed them. They missed some free throws, but they got the rebounds and put them back in. That's how they beat us in the Seattle Superdome. I mean, that was that was probably the most incredible ride. Larry Michael was my radio guy, and he went on that incredible run with us. And I've got video that I watch from that season to this day. And we had some great teams and great players at GW. And we became, not only did we have great success recruiting kids out of Baltimore, we got a great kid out of DC and Vaughn Jones, who had gone to DeMatha, Shante Rogers, Mike King. I mean, we had great players, Patrick Gumba. But then we got really fortunate. My assistant coach one day came back and said, "Coach, I got a kid that I really think can help us at GW." He had just gone to Africa, and he saw Yinka Dare. Now, Yinka at the time didn't know it. He had asthma, so he couldn't play very long or very well, but he had the most incredible body. He went to play for one of my former players, Scott Spinelli, at Milford Academy. He eventually came to GW, and he helped put us on the map. And then that led to us being able to recruit other international players like Alexander Kuhl and Yegor Masharikov. And in fact, you'll love this. My last year, I think at GW, or one of my last years, we had 11 players from 9 different countries. 3 of those players came from Belarus, and they could hardly speak a word of English when they came. But when they left, thanks to my academic advisor, Karen Urkel, and the support system at GW, they were Dean's List students. And so that was incredible. But the run to the Sweet 16, nothing.
Well, getting Dare, I was talking to Gus before we went on the air today, but his body type was a lot like Ewing's. That he was about 7'1". I remember he had the longest legs and arms I think I've ever seen.
Well, the thing about him, and I'm not going to argue with you, he was big, but he was much more muscular. I mean, first of all, barefoot, he didn't measure 7 feet. But when he put those sneakers on, he was 7 feet. But he was he was the strongest player physically that I ever coached. And when he dunked the ball, and that's pretty much all he did was dunk. When he dunked, the whole building shook. And he put the fear of God in many a player, in many a team.
So, Coach, you've coached all these great players. Now, your college career, you've won over 300 games in college. You said, okay, now it's time. You coached at Florida Atlantic. I think that was your last school you were a coach.
Well, I didn't make that decision, Gus. In fact, I won over 400 games in college. Okay, to be honest with you, but some crazy things happened after I actually coached my last game at St. John's. We had a falling out at St. John's with the president, and eventually he said, "Listen, goodbye." So I experienced what most people experience in sport. You either get cut at one point in time when you get old, or you get fired if you're a coach. So I got cut. I got fired. You call it whatever you want. And I had no intention of coaching anymore because I really felt that it wouldn't be fair to put my wife through that again. So when I moved to Florida, because I wanted to stay on the southeast, the east. I wanted to go someplace. My wife wanted to go someplace warm. And I was going to go to work, and I did. I went to work for ESPN, doing some commentary, a lot of studio work, which I did not like. So I worked with ESPN, and then eventually I worked with Fox. But then in 2008, the job at Florida Atlantic opened up, and I was living in Boca, and it was almost like I'm supposed to coach there. So I took the job at Florida Atlantic and coached my last 6 years.
Because I was looking up your Wikipedia and it said over 300 games, and I didn't realize it was over 400.
Well, and I will say it's over 400 because what happened was there was a situation that took place at St. John's. I don't even usually get into it, where St. John's at that time, they took away like 40 wins of mine. Okay, and that's a whole nother story. But anyhow, the real number is 400 plus. As far as head coaching victories, it's over 600. And I just mentioned that because it's almost like I hate the fact that it is written in some places as being 300 and something wins. You know what I'm saying? But
Was
anyhow,
Artest already
that's
at
another
St.
story
John's
for
when you
another
arrived, or
time.
did you recruit him?
Yes, Fran Fischella, the great announcer or commentator who is now with ESPN, was the head coach at St. John's. He recruited Ron Artest. So I inherited Ron Artest. I came the year after Felipe Lopez left. So Ron Artest was on my first team at St. John's. And I'll never forget the first meeting I had with the team. Ron says, "Hey, coach, do you really think that we can win the national championship?" And he said it in such a way that, I normally I would have said, "Hey, listen, rookie." But I said, "Yes, that's why I'm here, because I wanted to have a chance to win a national championship." Because Ron Artest was in his, I want to say, sophomore or junior year. Eric Barkley was an All-American point guard from Christ the King in New York. He was coming to school. They had a kid by the name of Bootsy Thornton from Baltimore who was a great junior college player. LeVar Postel, Tyrone Grant. They had great players, but they didn't win the year before, or at least they didn't go far enough, so they got rid of Fran Fischella. I came in, and immediately things really clicked. And we went to the Elite Eight. In fact, if Ron Artest, I love Ron, had played a little better the night we played Ohio State, we would have gone, and we really should have gone to the Final Four that year. But we didn't. And but we went a long way. We went as far as I guess you could go without going to the Final Four. And we beat a lot of good teams on the way. And so the St. John's experience was great. The next year, Ronnie decided to go to the pros, which was fine. We had a great group of kids coming back. And we ended up in 1 week. You're going to love this. In 1 week, we beat Connecticut, Syracuse, and Duke. Okay, in 1 week. We did not lose a game during the month of February. And the only game we lost after, around that time was a game that we should have really won down at Miami. But, calls were a little questionable. And that year we went to the Sweet 16. And we lost to Gonzaga on basically their home court out west. The NCAA rewarded us by sending us out to the West Coast to play West Coast teams. But that's a whole nother story
So,
for
Coach,
another time.
You made all these transitions in your life. We've heard about them all. You finished up. You retired from coaching.
Yes.
Now you said you're even busier now than you were when you were coaching. So tell us a little bit about everything you're doing now.
I am. Well, what I did was we started putting together some books. So I wrote a few books, Skills for Life. Everybody Needs a Head Coach. And my last book, The 7 C's of Leadership. And so what I'm doing now is, and I'm going to write another book. And I'm going to basically do a story about how, maybe I'll call it transition. You never know. But I am in the process of doing another book. I'm teaching leadership skills using my book at the South Florida Bible College in Deerfield Beach, and I got great students there. I am doing some speaking, so if you know anybody's looking for a paid speaker, I'm available. And I also just recently got involved in a multi-level marketing direct sales company called Valentis, which basically their go-to product is diet coffee. And I was telling somebody, yes, it's incredible. I'm telling you, and it works. Gus, 2 years ago, a guy came to my house and said, "I want you to start using this coffee. I want you to get into the business." I said, I haven't got time. I'm speaking, I'm writing books, I'm setting up this course, but I'll buy some product. I started using the product. I weighed in this morning, Gus, at 180 pounds, okay? And the stuff works. I mean, it suppresses your appetite, it cuts your cravings down, and they've got some other great products. So if you know anybody that's been in multi-level marketing, okay, I'm telling you, that's been in multi-level marketing, that wants to be involved in a great company, this is it. All they have to do is contact me. and I'll
No,
get them
that's
set up
amazing,
and
Coach.
go.
So part of our show is about all the transitions that we make and everything that we can do. And throughout your whole life,
Yes.
you have worked hard. You have shown that I can leave one spot, go to another spot, be successful. And that's what we want to show our fans, that no matter where you are in your stage of life, that you can transition
Okay.
into something and make something of yourself. And whatever you love to do, just go out and do it and put a lot of passion and hard work behind it. And you've really shown us that it's all possible, no matter what age you are or how long you've been in the biz.
Well, I tell you what, I believe that God put us here to work. He gave each and every one of us unique skills and abilities. He wants us not only to use them, but to share them. And if I had retired like most people think retirement is, you play golf every day or you fish every day, I probably wouldn't be alive today. That would kill me. And I love the fact that, you know what, and you talk about transition, and I'm going to tell you something, Gus. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought when I was told I wasn't wanted at St. John's anymore, I thought my world was over. I thought it was over because I had put all my identity into being this big time college coach. And then all of a sudden, I mean, people don't even remember your name. So, but I was told a long time ago that whatever gifts you have, figure out how you can use them when you have to make that transition. So the gifts that I had was all the experiences that I had coaching and teaching. So I said, you know what would be better than putting it in a book and sharing it, maybe someday in a movie. And I love to help other people. So that's another reason why I got involved in Valentis in the coffee business. And it's great when you can help other people and you can share your story. And you know what? You can help some other people make that transition because guess what? There's life after basketball. There's life after coaching. There's life after announcing. Just like you. I mean, did you ever think that you'd be doing what you're doing? I thought I was going to coach until the day I died. I thought they would carry me off the court on a stretcher, and then an hour later, they would bring me back in
Under
and
the
bury me
floorboards
under the court.
at
That's
the
what I
Garden.
thought it was going to be.
Well, you know what, Coach? That
Yeah.
little kid Crisco came a long way. And he's really proved that anything is possible.
Well, if you had Diet Coffee back then, you might have been a center fielder.
Well, I eventually played center field when I kept coaching.
So, hey, Coach, I know you have
But
2
you're
books.
right.
So when we put your show out that week, would you care if we did a little thing on social media where we could give a signed autograph book away to some of our fans?
Oh, yeah, I tell you what, let's do this. Yes, the answer is yes. And it could be either of one of, I am in the process. I'm all out of everybody needs a head coach. But I'm going to have some of those. So I'll have available, and if you want, I could send you a picture of all 3 books. And what you could do is you could,
Well, we'd
I
love
don't
to
know how
give
many
one of
books
each
you want
away.
to
That'd
give
be
away.
great. I think that would be wonderful.
Oh, okay, give away a couple, 2, 3 of each. I'll send you a picture when we get through. I'll take a picture of the 3 books together. I'll send it to you, and you can offer signed books. They could choose which book they want because I've got an order of books coming in for everybody needs a head coach. So they can pick either the Skills for Life, Everybody Needs a Head Coach.
That would be wonderful. That'd be a great promo. That would be a great promo.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll sign them, and if we know the people's name.
All right,
beautiful.
hey, Coach, one
But I'll
last
put
thing we
something
do.
nice
We have
in
a
there.
little 2-minute drill we do. It's called No Huddle. Dave fires a lot of questions at you and answer them quick.
Okay.
Or however you want. We have a lot of fun with it, but it's called No
Okay.
Huddle. So, Dave, let's start throwing some questions at Coach.
All right, Coach.
Okay.
In your opinion, what's the most overhyped thing in sports today? Don't
The
tell
dunk.
Yinka that. How about the loudest arena you ever played in or coached in?
Cameron, indoor stadium.
Do you have
Love
any
it.
pet peeves?
players that think they know more
That's a
than
good
the
one.
coach.
That would be almost every coach says that, right? I think all my coaches told me that too.
If you could
Yeah,
change
probably
one
they
rule
should.
in sports today, any sports, what would it be?
Well, probably the rule I would change would be if a kid declared for the NBA and didn't make it, and this is the same rule that John Calipari would put in. That kid could go back to college, have to sit out a year, but then would have.
That's a great. I agree with that. I think that should happen.
Coach, you mentioned maybe your book's
Yep.
getting turned into a movie. Who would you like to play you in a movie if you had a
Yes.
choice?
Hey, listen. When I was a little bit younger, I would have said Denzel Washington. So the next Denzel Washington. I want him to be me. We'll put my old beard on him. We'll give him some nice canali suits. We'll make him look good. But more important than that is who would play my wife. See, there was a time when I would have said, we'll get Halle Berry to play my wife. But my wife said, oh, no.
Well, we can get Denzel's son. I played with him at the Rams, John David. And, I think that might be a very good one to play you in your role in your life. I think John David would be great.
He's handsome enough.
Yeah, he definitely is. All right, Coach, last one. I think I know the answer to this, but if you could be one athlete ever in the history of sports, what athlete would that be?
Well, you know who that would be. That would be Bill Russell, because he played for Red Auerbach.
Yeah,
I
really thought that was going to be the answer. So, of course you did. Coach, we really appreciate you coming on, telling us your story, letting our fans know a little bit about your life history, and we'll let you know when this all comes out. We do it every Monday. We're about 3 weeks out right now, so we'll let you know when your show is aired. And we'll do a great promotion through social media. And what we ask is if you are on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that and have friends that you can reshare it, retweet it, all those things. And then when the platform is ready, then you can reshare that as well.
You can bet on it. And let me tell you this, too. When Terry Schulman called me, my old friend Terry, and told me that you were doing this, and would I be interested? I said, you kidding me? I mean, honestly, when I came to Washington, D.C., to Maryland, and I also fell in love with the Redskins, and I watched you play many a game. And, wherever I live, I root for the home team. And I've rooted for you, and I will now root for you even more. And I wish you, as you make your transition, I wish you the very, very best. And I want your sidekick to send me his information so I can
definitely.
Absolutely.
I think I would be his first customer,
All right,
Coach.
send me
because I'm not working out like I used to, so
okay.
I definitely would be his first customer.
Well, I'm telling you, the stuff, it worked. Okay. Well, listen, I loved being on with you. Okay, it's a great. I couldn't think of a better way of starting today. And I wish you guys the very, very best. And if there's ever anything
all right, wonderful, Coach.
Thank you,
Thanks
Coach.
for joining us, and I appreciate all the nice things that you said. Hey, thank you. Have a great day.
See you guys. Hey, thank you. See you guys. Bye-bye.